Can I bring in the next caller? It's Andy, who joined us a couple of weeks ago on the last show. Are you with us, Andy?
Hi, Dennis. Can you? Hang on.
Yeah, we heard you. Hello?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hiya. How are you all? Okay.
Very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. As you know, I've had a quite radical change in direction just the past week or so. Given our sort of chats and sort of being very, very frank and honest with myself. But one thing which I used to study up on quite a lot was actually the global flood of Noah. If I can just go through my scenario, then perhaps you can just pull me up and just give an explanation of what you think is wrong with it. But we know it back in the Bible, in part of Genesis, just as God was supposedly forming the land at the time, he separates the water from the land. So it actually says that you put the water in one place and you put the land in the other place. Now, we know that the earth today is far, far different to the way it used to be back in biblical times. Apparently, I don't necessarily subscribe to this at the moment, or I used to, but obviously my thinking has changed somewhat. So, I don't necessarily subscribe to this, but it was just a thought which I used to have. And I pretty much sort of kind of abandoned it in a way. But I think in some time in the Earth's history, perhaps there was some kind of a flood which actually happened. But I'm just going to go back to my point now. We know that the Earth was obviously very, very different back when it was supposedly first created. And we also know that at some point in the Earth's history, it has been struck by some sort of object from outer space. We see that there's a huge crater just off the Gulf of Mexico and just in Yucatan Peninsula, just off the coast of Mexico there. Now, some creationist websites, they do say, and it used to be a personal opinion of myself, is that it just may have caused the tectonic plates to appear, through the cracking up of the fault lines and things like this. Because but back when the Earth was originally made, the land was in one place. We call it Pangaea, if you like. We know that the Earth it's always been spherical. It's always been round. We could see the shadow on the moon as the sun passes behind the planet. But it's my opinion that before tectonic plate movement, this landmass could have well been very, very flat. This is why I think, some of the evolutionists used to say this, you believe in a flat Earth. Well, we always know it was spherical, but it used to be flat. Now, I don't think it would have taken much in a way of a flood to have completely submerged just this one continent. I don't know if you've got any sort of views on that at all. I mean, I don't necessarily subscribe to this. As I said, I've had a radical change of mind the past week or two. I've spoken to DPR quite deeply, and also Aaron as well. And my apologies go out to Aaron and DPR, and I've been a little bit what's the word? I want to try and find. I've not been very honest with myself, not been very honest with some of the people on YouTube. I've been disrespecting them, and my apology goes out to them.
Well, that's very kind of you. I'm grateful for your comments.
Okay.
If we could just try and deal with the point you're raising. You raised a number of points, but I think if I can narrow it down to two. One, that things are very much different now than how they were, let's say, 2,000 years ago when the Bible was written, or 4,000 years ago, perhaps. And secondly, or more specifically in relation to that, the Earth was flatter. Concordance, can you address that?
I'm not sure how it can be both. It's not actually spherical. It's obviously an oblate spheroidal, and it's not even exactly oblate spheroidal, but
20 miles difference.
Yeah, it's a very small difference, matter of yards. I'm not quite sure how it could have been flatter. That's an unusual point. But let's address the difference between now and then. The Bible is obviously not meant to be a scientific textbook. If you're familiar with it, grows to very large size because it's living in a hyperbaric chamber, but it's not actually under hyperbaric conditions. And there's, we have a lot of experience with the effect of higher levels of oxygen. There's just no way for a human being to live that long. And it's interesting that It's absolutely toxic. High levels of oxygen produce oxygen radicals, which you can simulate with things like UV irradiation, with smoking. And skin damage. Yeah, all sorts of things. Thanks a lot for demonstrating that, Don. So those kinds of things obviously illustrate that what was going on was allegorical. It was borrowing from the Sumerian tradition. I think it was the Sumerians, where they would make claims to be extremely old, right? That was part of the mythology of the Bible. And it's only when people tie their beliefs to the entire literal word-for-word accuracy of the Bible, if you have to truly believe that the Bible is a reliable source of historical and scientific information, then you're screwed. You have a choice. You have the choice to believe in the Bible and tie up your whole faith bundle into that one book, or you have to decide which parts you're going to pick and choose from. And that's why among non-believers, you get this objective morality. The Bible is a source of objective morality. It's a revelation of God. It's a divine law. As you read through it, you see these things that are clearly, patently false, not possible, not viable. And to then say, well, this is the one true source. We have to believe everything in this book. You can't hold those two ideas simultaneously, that this is not true and this is objectively, eternally true. That's where the disconnect comes for a lot of non-believers.
And the other, if I may point out real quick, as an avid scuba diver, there's something very big called oxygen toxicity, and that if you're diving with nitrox or any sort of at any sort of even a couple percent, air is 21% oxygen or 22%. If you go up even a couple percentage points, you can be okay. But what happens when you go under pressure is it's absolutely deadly in a very short amount of time. Like 27% oxygen at the pressure of 100 feet of water is. You will undergo oxygen toxicity and die, have seizures, and within a relatively short amount of time. We're talking minutes here. It's a well-known phenomenon in diving. So combining high concentrations of oxygen plus pressure equals death. So.
So you're talking about the bends there with, I think, aren't you?
No, bends are different. Bends are when you with the nitrogen coming out of the blood as you go up. That's the bubbles block off your bubbles block off your capillaries, so parts of your body don't get oxygen, basically. But they're similar. They're both pressure effects on gases.
Oh, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, Andy, there are things to try to figure out in this. I mean, there was here where I live, for example, the entire state of Texas was at one point under an inland sea, and it was one that bisected the North American continent. And as I said, I was on the beach of this sea at one point, and you could tell that it's very distinct. I mean, there's no mistaking that that's what this is. So they've isolated where this was, where it cuts across the United States, where it bisected the United States, where the borders of the sea were. And coincidentally, the entire state of Texas then was underwater at this point, but the places west and east of it were not. Mm-hmm. They do not show the same evidence. I mean, you have the shoreline where you have all these life forms that wash up against the shore, and there they are. That shoreline is now completely land-based, but it's very obviously what was a beach once upon a time. Yeah. These formations change over time. Rivers cut through, pressure points build, mountains rise, volcanoes do a lot, but they don't do the same sorts of things as tectonic movement does. Another thing that you have to look at, and Concordance raised this a moment ago, when you're talking about the age of things, okay, when you talk about the age of mythology, for example, you have to remember that the flood you are talking about, the very one, was mentioned in the Sumerian Book of the Kings. And that book, if you wanted to find archaeological evidence that there was ever, the Noachian flood, it wasn't a worldwide flood, but it was well known in the seed of written history. And prior to that, they have a history established in the Sumerian Book of the Kings that goes back some ridiculous number of years. It's in the tens of thousands of years. But it's based on a numeric system that was base 60, because they hadn't invented the number 0 yet. And I know this sounds very confusing. It's something you'd have to research a good long time, because it is confusing. They didn't have a number 0. They had a different kind of number system. The older things were, the older things were. It was on a sliding scale, it seems. But when you look at the Sumerian Book of the Kings and you start following the genealogies there, and then you look in the Library of Alexandria and the remnants that we have from the ancient documents of true antiquity that were eventually destroyed, there are surviving fragments of various stories in there where, again, they talk about histories that go back tens of thousands of years. Okay, and some of them... Go ahead, Donnie.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I thought you were finished. Go ahead.
I am, essentially. Go ahead.
I just had something pop into my mind, and that's the question of what happened with the plants. I mean, they're buried under thousands of feet of water where there's no sunlight, and the fact that they're underwater. Plants don't have gills, which I understand is news to creationists, but perhaps not everybody here. But also they're buried under all of the sediment too. I mean, right? I mean, that's what Nephilim Free loves to point out, are polystrate trees that are completely buried. You know, they're under hundreds of feet of sediment. So that means that no living tree could survive. I mean, why do we have all of these trees around, some of which even predate the flood? I mean, how do we have trees? How do we have the variety of trees that we find? I mean, how did this happen if everything's buried under all of this sediment?
And where did that olive branch come from when the dove returned? Did a new olive tree sprout from 20 feet below the level of the water and grow in the period of 1 year that the earth was flooded? Right? It was this obvious disconnects. I mean, it really does feel silly to have to argue this.
The only way that you can justify it is just to honestly say it's magic. And that is, by definition, what it is. It's magic. You could believe in magic or you could not. I mean, I choose not to.